Hi, my name is Krista, and we're out here in Big Bone, Kentucky, recording another segment. This segment we're going to call The Burn.
Alright, so I want to talk to you a little bit about this field behind me. Remember we mentioned that this segment would be called The Burn, and here's the reason why. A couple Saturdays ago, this field actually was set fire. This was a deliberate fire, meaning it was intentionally set. These are often known as prescribed burns or controlled burns. These are different from wildfires. So what that means by a prescribed burn or a controlled burn is that it is set with an intention. We will talk in a little bit about why somebody would do that, because it sounds kind of crazy, but there's really some good reasoning behind it. What makes a controlled burn different from a wildfire? Lots of things. First off, this was set by man. It was not caused by a natural cause like lightning. In order for this to be done properly, as in the case of this fire, there were many people present. There's a readily available water source, appropriate weather, meaning you don't want to be out here doing this on a really windy day. I think it kind of makes sense why. And then careful attention has to be taken to the edge of the field. So I'm not sure in our shot if you can see where the fire ends and the grass begins.
Mm-hmm, you can see it.
Okay, that is deliberate. Again, because this is a controlled burn. And how we get a clean edge on something is unpredictable as a fire is because the edges are mowed down and then watered down like shortly before the burn began. So that Saturday, the farmer was out here earlier that day mowing along the edge, and then we saw them round dinner time out here with hoses watering down the edge. So we talked about the edges and how they are prepared, and this is a major part of making sure that this fire is controlled. The edges, the goal is the outline that is created by the edges is where the fire is going to be started, and the fire will then burn inward. So you create an outline, and then the fire on its own will burn inward, and then it extinguishes on its own as well. The reason, again, for all of this, fire has been a natural part of forest and grassland ecology for many, many years. It started with Native Americans. They actually used fire to improve land for grazing for wildlife. This was perfect for them because if they could improve the conditions, the animals would come and graze, and that would improve their chances for hunting. The animals basically came to them that way. It would also help clear land for farming because, remember, Native Americans were growing their own crops, and it also would improve Native American safety because you can see attackers when you don't have trees and brush and things in their way. So throughout history, this method has been beneficial. And as a matter of fact, the European settlers learned this from the Native Americans, and they adopted this method of farming as well. Notice how this field looks. This is how the field that was burned looked prior to the burn. Last summer's growth is dead and still standing, and succession will eventually take over. Succession is when things come in and grow in an empty space. So basically you take an empty field, it won't stay empty very long, You can come back 5-10 years later and it may look like a forest. You may have shrubs and trees at 10 years, at 5 years, young trees. But these are the stages of succession. It starts off as grasses and wildflowers, and then they become more woodier shrubs, small trees. It takes time, but it does move pretty fast. So this is one of the benefits of a procedure like a burn. It keeps things from growing. So why would anybody want to do that? Well, if you were a farmer and you were going to plant crops, this is a great way to clear off a field, because when you burn last year's growth, nutrients actually go back into the soil. Decomposition is when dead plants and animals basically decompose with the help of insects and fungi, and that puts nutrients back into the soil so that new plants can grow. So for a farmer, this is a great way to clear out last year's crops to get your field ready for this year's crops. Also helps with weed control, and it keeps a lot of times seeds from weeds will not survive a burn, so you don't have to worry about the seeds from weeds that did grow last year coming back. Lastly, I want to talk about some seeds that can stand up to a fire. So I mentioned that some weed seeds cannot germinate after they've been burned, but there are seeds that are called serotinous. So this term, serotinous, is a seed that needs an environmental trigger to pop open, and jack pine would be an example of that. So this concludes our edition of the burn. I do want to throw out there, this is an event that is controlled and planned. So this is not something that you can just do on a moment's notice. There's all kinds of ordinances for where you live as well. We live in a more rural part of Boone County, lots of farms, and that it's acceptable out in this area, but more in town areas, suburban areas, it's an issue. It's not something that can be done as a method of weed or weed control. Thank you and have a great day.